Past in the past. There's another problem. There are lots of problems, but let me get into that slowly. But there are a lot of problems with the Big Bang. The Big Bang theory is basically this. Once upon a time, there was nothing. I have a handful of nothing here, right? You can see that. There's nothing in there. Do you want what I got? Once upon a time, there was nothing. The nothing coalesced, became an intense little energy egg. Where the energy came from out of nothing is amazing. And then it exploded, making this. This is a rock. This is the Big Bang theory in its finest. That is the foundational view of the Big Bang theory. This rock, I'll let you choose which is the most difficult to believe. This rock, all by itself, particles of matter, coalesced matter, big rocks, in the presence of some kind of environment, and scientists aren't sure what, either maybe an oxidizing environment, maybe a carbon dioxide environment, nobody's really sure. This rock became a frog. Now, that's kind of hard to believe, right? Nothing to rock is hard to believe. Rock the frog is hard to believe. But most evolutionists, when you get into discussions of evolution, take you from frog to princess. Do you think if you kissed this frog, it would turn into a princess? No, probably not. So which is more difficult to believe? The frog became a princess? The rock became a frog? Nothing became a rock. Well, nothing became a rock. That's pretty hard to believe. That's true. The foundation of evolutionary thinking is that nothing became something. That's the foundation. You've got to get that in your mind. People sidetrack you with the gorilla to people evolutionary teaching. That's got nothing to do with it. The basis of evolution is that at one point in time, nothing became something. That's the foundation. Take it right back to there. That nothing became. I agree with Charlie. I think the most difficult to believe of all of that, although it's all totally ludicrous, is it not? Is that nothing became something. Well, here's the problem. And they managed to drag Einstein into this. It says Einstein and some of others, they accuse Einstein of developing the Big Bang theory, and that's a lie. I'm surprised at that. This comes from New Scientist magazine, which you can get at the University of New England. New Scientist magazine and Science magazine, both of them did articles on the Big Bang. Einstein was not a Big Bang proponent exactly. Einstein believed that there was matter there. Einstein too agreed, no, the idea that nothing became something is totally stupid, therefore it must be expanding, contracting. He called it the EPR theory, that the universe expanded, contracted, expanded, contracted. Problem was it was always expanding. There's no hint that it ever contracted. Problem for Einstein. But anyhow, with the Hubble telescope, what happens when something blows up? It gets scattered. And when something blows up, it gets scattered evenly.
Not this time.
Well, that's the problem. The Hubble telescope is showing clumps. The clumps don't make any sense. The universe needs to be smooth for the Big Bang theory to be right. It needs to be scattered smoothly. Well, the Hubble is showing that that's not the case. It's very lumpy out there. That's a problem. So much of a problem that an astrophysicist from Nottingham University acknowledges, and this is a quote, and you can read it in New Scientist magazine, August 21, 1999. If we cannot show uniformity in a grand scale, we are lost. The foundations of the Big Bang model crumbles. We are left with no explanation for galaxy formation or the distribution of galaxies in the universe. The lumpy universe out there, you won't hear this many places, but the lumpy universe out there is a big problem. And while biologists are happily teaching that the frog became a princess, their foundation is crumbling away because astrophysicists are now starting to learn more and more. The more that we learn, the more creation makes sense. Chuck Swindoll talked about it this morning. He was talking about creation, and he said, out of nothing. What did he say? Out of the 1,000 darkest nights of a cypress swamp, or something like that. An old Negro spiritual. 1,000 nights, dark nights of a cypress swamp. God reached in and pulled out and made light. Just made it. He just spoke, and there it was. There is no better model than a designer. The more we discover, the more we realize the foundations of science are shaky indeed, and the foundations of Scripture are very solid indeed. If you've heard W. Bach lately, I have a little creation announcement back on W. Bach, and I point out that in reality, science is a study of reality and truth. In real life, when you see something that looks like it was made, you know that it was. So forget this Big Bang thing. Forget it. It's crumbling. But you know the answer. The answer is that God created. Why does the universe look lumpy? God made it that way. That's why the universe looks lumpy. There's no excuse for this planet to be here. Once the explosion occurred and all the matter scattered, why would it attract itself? Huh? There's no reason. Science knows that. So there you have it. The Big Bang is a blast in the past that is blasting itself away. You are here because God designed you. Thank you. With me everywhere. It's not my pet rock. I don't have a pedigree to this. By the way, there was such a thing as a pet rock at one time. You could buy a pet rock with a pedigree. America is quite a country, isn't it? How old is this rock? How can you tell how old the rock is? How do you date a rock? Well, there are ways that scientists try to date rocks, but they have to make certain assumptions. And I want to talk about one now called potassium argon. Potassium, when it shows up in rocks, for whatever reason, disintegrates radioactively into two daughter elements, calcium and argon. So what they do is, the calcium is difficult to deal with, so they measure the argon. So the potassium, when it shows up in a rock, there's potassium in most rocks, it winds up turning itself into argon. Now there are some assumptions with these chemical dating processes. One, that when the rock forms, there is no daughter or son element. So it was nothing but potassium in this rock when it was formed. That's assumption number one. Assumption number two is that while the rock is sitting there, none of the son or daughter element is going to go into it. So no argon will run into this rock while it's sitting here. And assumption number three major assumptions. Number three is that the change rate from potassium to argon is constant. That as the potassium degenerates and becomes argon, it's constant. So it's pretty clear then, if you know the exchange rate, and you know that there's no daughter running into this, and you know what was in it in the beginning, well then you can tell how old it is. Well, there are some problems. There is a particular, I can't even pronounce it. Ngauruho, I guess is how you pronounce it. It's in New Zealand anyway. And they took some lava rocks and they sent it to a place in Boston, Geochron Laboratories in Cambridge, Boston, right next to MIT. Very well-respected laboratory used for dating lava rocks. Well, the rocks were observed to cool about 25 years ago. They dated them as being in excess of 3 million years old. See, the problem is apparently that when the lava cools, it encapsulates argon in it. So it has potassium and argon. It has some of the daughter. But that is so critical in the chemical dating. You are led to believe, if you read the newspapers, if you read the science section in Time magazine, even if you study science in school, you're led to believe that the chemical dating process is almost a sure thing. It's ridiculously off. It relies on that assumption that there was none of the daughter or son in the rock when it was formed. Potassium may break down, but what if there's some of the breakdown product already in the rock? Then your ages are way off. Way off. So here's a rock, not this one here, but rocks similar to this, lava rocks, sent to a Cambridge laboratory near MIT, used all around the world to date rocks. And it came up with a date of 3 million years. And yet the rocks were visually seen to form in the lava flow 25 years ago. So don't think for 1 second that because a scientist tells you something that he knows what he's talking about. Scientists, including me, scientists make a lot of assumptions. And one assumption that most scientists, or the scientists of the world, do not make or do not want to deal with is that God has anything to do with anything. I'm a scientist, and I start with a very basic assumption that God created. God is real. God took action. And I know how old rocks are, most rocks, because God made them. He made the volcano that spits out the lava. And we know how old things are. We don't have to use these silly chemical dating processes. So the dating processes used by science are not proof of age at all. By the way, once they've dated this lava as 3 million years old, this rock, if they find a fossil in it, they say that fossil is 3 million years old. It's a circular reasoning thing. And never ever do they go back and change. They say, well, we messed up on that rock, therefore that fossil is not 3 million years old. It's not at all logical. I want to just leave you with this morning. Don't for 1 minute believe that scientists have a truly scientific way of dating rocks. They do not. The assumptions are faulty, and their results, in some cases, turn out to be ridiculous, like this one here. Thank you. There's a little picture of a nerve. And I've got a more fancy picture here of a nerve. What nerve? Well, what is a nerve? Nerve is a very marvelous cell, an absolutely unbelievable cell. The way your brain works, I could say, is kind of strange. But if I said that, people would take offense to that. But the way our brains work is really it's an absolute, total miracle. If you look at the bulletin picture, or this one up here, the nerves have two ends, sort of, that look very much like a couple of what do you call those fuzz balls? Those foosballs? Dandelions. They're like dandelions. They do not contact each other. The nerves are very tiny. There's millions of these things. They do not contact each other. If they did, they would short circuit, much like I did Wednesday night. We have a switch in the closet out here that I turn on and off sometimes. It's a timer switch, and sometimes the timing isn't set quite right. And Wednesday I reached in there. There's a little plastic protective covering over those poles, the contacts. It had fallen off. I didn't realize that, and I rammed my fingers in there like I always do, and lit up. If that happened in your brain, it wouldn't work. It's called a short circuit. In fact, one of the cell legs becomes an actual transmitting arm, and there's a picture here that shows this little purple insulation. It's the myelin sheath. If you have MS, there's a short circuit in that sheet. I have a son-in-law who has MS, and what happens is that the things discharge at the wrong place. So what happens is, if in your nerve cell, you've got the two ends that are coming as they meet, and there's an actual ionic exchange. A little particle floats from this end to that end. That's how you think. You're able to think because a little particle moves from one end to this end. They do not touch each other. Think about that. They do not touch each other. Millions and millions of cells in your brain, and they do not actually touch each other. If they did, you're short-circuited, you don't work. It works by an ion exchange. That's an activated particle, a charged particle. Now let me read a couple of statements here that are just absolutely mind-boggling, I think. There's a guy, his name is Dr. Werner Gitt from Germany. He's an information scientist. He's played around with the brain a little bit. He said if you were to try to describe the nervous system as a circuit diagram, it would be several hundred times more complex than the entire global telephone network. That's all inside your body. Think about that. That's all inside your body. Another man, Dr. Restak, who wrote a book called The Brain, published by Bantam Books, says that there are probably 100 trillion or more synapses in the brain. The synapse is that little junction that where the two fibers don't actually touch, but there's a little chemical that pops back and forth. Think about that, 100 trillion of those. And each one operates as a tiny calculator. This man's not a Christian, by the way, he's just a scientist. He's an evolutionist, as a matter of fact. Each one operates as a tiny calculator that tallies signals arriving as electrical pulses. Think about that. 100 trillion little itsy-bitsy tiny calculators in your brain, all functioning in the proper way, of a complexity that would equal, if you mapped it out, the mapping out of the entire global telephone network. Now, if I were to tell you that the entire global telephone network happened one day because at some university somewhere somebody threw a hand grenade into a pile of wire, it blew up and created the global telephone network, you would say, Brian, you're an idiot. At least I hope you would. And yet, you and I are told by the biological scientists that with absolutely no designing influence whatever, that's what classical evolution is all about. It is not the ape or gorilla to man. That's not what classical evolution is about. Classical evolution is about nothing to rock, rock to frog, frog to princess. That's what it's about, with no designing influence at all. That's why it is such a dastardly, in England they pronounce it evolution. Much better. Much, much better. We should adapt that pronunciation. It's a very evil concept. But that's what you're dealing with evolution, that it's all by accident. That this system, with 100 trillion synaptic joints in it, all functioning like little tiny computers, that would take more complexity than to map out the entire global telephone system, all happened by accident. Ludicrous in the extreme. When something looks like it's designed, a scientist knows that it is designed. That's what our search for extraterrestrial intelligence is all about. If we get signals coming back in from outer space that appear to be somehow structured, then we know that there's a creator out there. There's some kind of intelligent life out there. Well, if there is, there's more than what's here, because we have much more structured systems than that, and we try to deny that they were designed. We say they happened by accident. So there you have it. Your nerve. What a nerve. Your whole nerve system, amazingly complex, incredibly designed. Think about that. The very fact that we have a disease like MS should point out to you what an awesome creature you are. Huh? Something goes wrong. 1 in a million or so something goes wrong, and it sets the whole system awry. Huh? What an awesome creature you are, that there are so many millions and millions and millions of people, 6 billion on the planet right now, supposedly, and growing every day. And every one of you is designed so well, in such complexity. What an awesome system you are. Think about your nerves. Think about your brain and the way your brain works. Think about it sometime. All those neurons in your brain. Hercule Poirot says the little gray cells. I like mystery. I like Agatha Christie. Well, those little gray cells, none of the wires in there touch each other. If they do, you have a short circuit and you don't work well. Praise God for the marvelous way, because you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Thank you. And I have a picture here. The title of the article is called Towering Change, but it's a ziggurat. It's a depiction of the Tower of Babel. Dr. Weiland was speaking in Singapore, and a couple people approached him and said, is there anything in the Bible about the origin of language? Why do we all speak so differently? And the truth is, there is, in the book of Genesis, chapter 11. But it's so important, and what I want to stress tonight are 2 things as we think about languages, is to think about also exactly what the Bible says. Don't try to make it say something that it doesn't. Be honest to the Scripture. Hang right to it. Cling to it. In chapter 11, verse 7, God says, let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. If you remember, they were building this great big tower. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth. And they left off to build the city. They stopped building the city. They were supposed to go any way around the earth, but they decided to build a city and build this great tower to God. Well, actually to themselves, to prove that they didn't need God. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Now, does that mean every language that exists today originated at the time of the Tower of Babel? Does it mean that? Is that what the Bible is saying? No. That's not what it means, and that's not what the Bible is saying. Speaking of language, I have got something wrong with my throat. What the Bible is saying is that a bunch of different languages where there was confusion. Everybody could communicate easily. And then, like that, at the time of the building of the Tower of Babel, there was confusion in language. But it doesn't mean that every dialect, every language that we have today was created instantaneously at the time of the Tower of Babel. It's not what the Bible's saying. Languages do change. English changes. I went to a corrosion seminar at Rutgers years ago. And at Rutgers University, they had invited a person from England. And I thought, that's great, at least this will be in English. We were doing fine till he was talking about some practical applications, this professor, and all of a sudden he started talking about a lorry with a hood. And all I could think of was my daughter Lori wearing a hood. A lorry is a truck, and a hood, I said hood, I'm sorry. Bonnet, I meant to say. A lorry and a bonnet. The lorry is the truck, the bonnet is the hood. I'm sorry, I messed that up. But there was some confusion. I had a hard time picturing what he was talking about. Lorry being a truck and a bonnet being a hood. The windshield is a windscreen. There's some other little differences in language. Just in English right here, between England and here. Translation, and rightly so. But as Dr. Lowell Davies points out from the Bible Broadcasting Network, I'm going to try to read for you a passage out of the King James Version of the Bible, the 1611 version. And I wish you could see the spelling here. All ye that Fräulein and Ben Shadid, come to me, I shall fulfill you. Take ye my yoke on you, and learn ye of me, for I am mild and meek in heart, and ye shall find rest to your souls, for my yoke is soft and my charge light. You wouldn't be able to read that. It's English. My pronunciation probably is not quite proper, but many of the words are similar but quite. Travail is not written travail, it's written Fräulein. English languages change, they grow. They don't evolve, though. Languages change because of our creativity, really, if when you come right down to it. So why do we have different languages? In fact, what's Ebonics? Right? Ebonics is now a language of California. They thought that was going to solve all their problems. Ebonics is the African-American contortions of English, I guess, that they put together into a new language, and it's called Ebonics. Well, it didn't work. They're still having problems over there a few years after this has been installed. God is the one that caused different languages, but He's not the one that created every language that we have here. The Bible is very clear. At the time of the building of the tower, the big ziggurat, the Tower of Babel, at the time of the building of that tower, He confused their languages. He did not at that point create every language that we have on the face of the globe today. We did a lot of that ourselves. Language is a result of a lot of things. Twins have a very peculiar language all on their own. We had friends who had twins. The father now is a professor at UNH, but his two kids, nobody can understand anything that they said, ever. So be clear when you use the Scripture. Stick to exactly what it says. Languages are the result of the Tower of Babel. We have different languages because God caused it to be. And by the way, then they scattered. Since they couldn't talk to each other, they scattered. which is what they were supposed to do in the first place. But the dialects and the languages that we have now, every one of them on the globe today, no, did not come from that point in time in Genesis. We have modified many of our languages all the way along the line. And when you read the King James Bible, you're not reading the 1611 version. It's almost blasphemy. I see these people advertising the 1611 version of the Bible. No! Lowell Davies says what we have is a 1739. Somebody else I was reading today said it's a 1769 change to the 1611. I don't know. I can't verify that. I wasn't born until 1780. But anyway, we have languages as a result of the dispersion at Babylon, but all of the languages that we have do not come from that point. They come from our own ingenuity. Thank you. I wanted to bring a part of, in fact, the back cover of Creation magazine. I forgot it. I'm doing some seminars at Kennebunk Christian Academy started last Tuesday, and I have all my stuff in the big box in the back of the Jeep. I didn't bring it with me. Sea dragons, they are an incredible thing. You'll see what I'm going to do with this shortly. Sea dragons are a problem for evolutionists. Sea dragons are from the same family as seahorses. If you can picture a seahorse, you can picture a sea dragon. But the sea dragons are very fluffy, and they look like seaweed sort of floating around. Something very unusual about sea dragons. They don't have a stomach. So you can say, I have no relation to a sea dragon. I have a well-formed stomach. But sea dragons have no stomach. They're able to digest their food in the protuberance of their mouth, if you will. Their mouth kind of sticks out like a trumpet in the food that they swallow. And they eat shrimp and things like that. Digest in the mouth. So they don't have to chew, so they don't have to go to the dentist. They have no teeth. But that's a problem, because there's no intermediary step to get there. How did all of a sudden paleontologically, there's a real problem with how sea dragons got there and where sea dragons go. There are no fossils to show. There's no remains to show how they got to that point. And the fact that they don't have a stomach is a real problem, because since they didn't have a stomach, it means they didn't need one. Therefore, why would another creature who came from a sea dragon need to evolve a stomach when the sea dragon didn't need a stomach? Just like you don't need 5 stomachs. We're happy with one. And that leads me to what this is all about. I'm looking for a youngster, and they're all gone. Okay. Eric, come up here for a second. You want to come up? There are limits to biological change. That's what I want to talk about. Sea dragons did not evolve into something else. They are a problem only for no, not up there, over here. They were a problem only for evolutionists. Sea dragons were created. Okay, do you remember the tape measure from Mary Poppins? When she got it up to hers was practically perfect in every way. Well, let's see. Let me see. Okay, this says about 3 feet, about 39 inches, 40 inches. 40 inches. Okay, you can sit down now. See, he's a little over 3 feet tall, if I read that right. Yeah, 3 feet tall, and he's 3 years old. Okay, that's about a foot a year. Now, does that mean that when he is in high school, as a freshman at the age of 14, he will be 14 feet tall? Or does that mean when he is my age, that he will be over 50 feet tall? I don't think so. There are limits to biological change. And that's one thing that is seems to be a real, I don't know how evolutionists get over that. You can only change so much. So if you extrapolate, extrapolation is very dangerous. Scientists are very cautious about that. Extrapolating is guessing what happens later. So if you can watch something growing now, like Eric, for the first 3 years, you would think he was going to be 30 feet tall when he was 30, wouldn't you? That's why extrapolating is so dangerous. And evolutionists do that all the time. We talk about microevolution, or simply natural selection, and it's true. But just because microevolution or natural selection works does not mean that you can take the next step into macroevolution. And I have had in my house last year a biology textbook from a local high school that said, since we see microevolution at work, we know that macroevolution works. That means then, since I've seen and measured a child at 3 years old to be 3 feet tall, that I know that when he's 30, he'll be 30 feet tall. Ludicrous. You couldn't get a degree in science, in a mathematical science, if you did all of your work extrapolating out beyond what your data is. They would throw you out of school. Well, that's what evolution hangs on. And how did I get all this from the sea dragon? Because the sea dragon is a mystery. Nobody can figure out how it got there or what came from it. And the reason that it's a mystery is because evolutionists are constantly trying to work in that area of extrapolation beyond their data, beyond their observations, and it doesn't work. And there are limits to biological change. You will only grow to be so tall. I don't know how tall Eric will be when he's 30. You can look at his parents and guess, but I'll guarantee you he will not be 10 feet tall. I guarantee you that. There are limits to change. You cannot extrapolate into the unknown wildly, and that's what evolutionary scientists try to do. And what made me think of all that was the marvelous sea dragon, who nobody understands how it got there, or where it was going, or where it went. Thank you. I have here a can of oil. By the way, nobody made this can of oil. It just happened by accident one day. I was sitting there staring at my kitchen table, and it just popped into existence. And by the way, that's evolutionary theology. And here is a can of isopropyl rubbing alcohol, a bottle, excuse me. Well, this too, nobody designed. I want you to know that. It just happened by accident. Sounds kind of ludicrous, doesn't it? Well, here's this isopropyl alcohol which kills germs. It's antiseptic. If you have any kind of surgery done, there's nothing yet that really beats just plain straight alcohol. It kills germs. Remember the old cowboy movies where the guy would pour the whiskey on the wound and then take a couple swigs? That was to kill the pain. The alcohol did everything back then. It killed germs and dulled the pain. This is oil. It lubricates. Now, what if you had to walk around like this all day? Wouldn't this be a bummer? If you had to have a can of oil on one side of your head, a can of antiseptic on the other side of your head, and you walked around like this, it would be very difficult. It would be hard to put your hat on, hard to put your glasses on. It would not be easy at all. Your eyes are an awesome design. Crying, tears, do much more than people ever, I think most people realize. The first thing that tears do is they lubricate. And I won't even try to pronounce the name of the gland here, but it mentions that tears lubricate your eyeball. There's a thin layer of oil that is deposited on your eyeball that's manufactured in here, totally by accident. Not designed, just totally by accident, manufactured in here. Isn't that silly? Of course you're designed. You have an oil manufacturing device inside of your head. It manufactures oil which distributes over your eyeballs in the form of tears, which allows you to see. Otherwise, your eyes would dry out. The oil is what prevents the evaporation, prevents your eyes from drying out. The other thing that tears do, it says they bathe your eyes in lysozyme, which is one of the most effective antibacterial and antiviral agents known. Which makes an interesting thought. I suppose if you cut yourself and didn't have anything with you, if you could think of something sad and just cry on your wound, it would do a lot of good for you. Well, it also kills germs. And this article goes on to say that without the germ-killing ability of your tears, most of us would be blind in a very short time. We're going to hear some tears pretty soon here. He's lubricating his eyes and killing germs is what he's doing. So isn't that something? Think about the awesome design of the human body, and here's just a simple little eyeball. You've got two of them, and they wouldn't be worth a hoot if your body was not designed so efficiently that it can create its own oil and it squirts every 10 seconds. You lubricate your eyeball, approximately. That's what it says here. I never measured it, but every 10 seconds you lubricate your eye because you blink. And the same glands that produce crying produces the fluid. And by the way, there's a little drain hole on both sides. Iman can relate to this as a plumber. There's a drain hole on both sides of the eye that normally take care of the draining of the constant fluid being produced by these marvelously designed glands. And it's only when you create too much fluid that you overload the drain system, which every plumber is familiar with, and causes puddles, and you get a picture, and you get a picture like this. It's really a beautiful picture of a young lady here with a tear going down her cheek. What a marvelous thing that we're able to do that. And in addition to lubricating, it's killing germs. Now, you know, even NASA recognizes that if something appears to be designed, then it probably was. There is a project called SETI. It's the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Well, to look for some down here first, right? But the idea is if they receive a wave from outer space, a radio wave that has simple structure, regular pulses, something that looks and appears to be structured, then it's designed, and it means there's intelligent life out there. Those same scientists will look in the mirror, cry, think about the fantastic body that they have, and say, no intelligent life designed this. Isn't that silly? To quote Dr. Kent Hovind, if you really believe that, are you dumb in any other area, or just this one? That sounds kind of harsh, but think about it. Your eyes are an incredible, and I haven't even talked about the focusing, the neurons, and the sight. I'm talking about the simplicity of the lubrication and the killing of bacteria to keep you from going blind in a very short time. What an awesome design your body is. What an awesome design your eyeballs are. And with that kind of structure and design, unless you don't have anything in your skull, it's obvious that you are designed. And I'll end with this. There is a biologist, his name is L. Harrison Matthews. Dr. Matthews is fairly well known. He's an agnostic. He wrote a foreword to The Origin of Species, and he sums it up beautifully like this. Because of philosophical reasons, we cannot accept the idea that we are designed by a creator. We therefore choose to believe, now this is an agnostic speaking, we therefore choose to believe the impossible, that life spontaneously arose by chance. Think about that for a minute. Every bit of evidence that you look at, and which you can look at because you can blink and lubricate your eyes and kill the bacteria in there, tells you that you are designed, including your eyes themselves. The only reason that people reject the concept of design, the concept of a creator, is because they don't want to deal with the responsibility of facing that creator. They want to be in charge. Thank you. For our creation moment, because this is Communion Sunday, and we do that on Sunday night. And this time, the Creation magazine has a very interesting cover. I need to be careful how I say this. This is dedicated to Biddeford. No, actually, you notice that La Comesse, when I was a youngster, being called a frog here was an insult, but the La Comesse symbol is a frog. And my old friend Boomer Preventure, Robert Preventure, who I worked with for years and years at the Navy Yard, was the guy for quite a few, almost the last decade, since the beginning, has been the manager of the La Comesse Festival. And I asked him why they used the picture of the frog. And he says, we turned it upside down. And that they did. So the frog is no longer an insult. It is now a symbol of the La Comesse Franco-American Festival. Tonight, lions eat meat, right? This is an article about a lion that would not eat meat. This lion lived to be 9 years old. Never from the moment that it was born would it eat meat. In fact, there's a picture here of a lion and a lamb. That sound familiar? Someplace in the scripture, right? In Isaiah chapter 11, talking about the millennial kingdom, is the lion will lie down with the lamb. What's interesting about this article, it shows you the evolutionary bias that we have in our minds. The people were given this little baby lion when it was first born. It was attacked by its mother. And these people have a license to take care of injured wild animals. And they were given the lion, and people from the New York Zoo and veterinarians said, you've got to teach this lion how to eat meat. It cannot live unless it eats meat. So they tried putting blood in the milk, and it wouldn't drink the milk. 1 drop of blood in a quart of milk, and the lion would not touch it. This lion ate nothing but regular milk, cheese, vegetables, soybean products, stuff like that, but would not eat meat. Lived to be 9 years old. In fact, at the age of 4, she was 352 pounds. Her name is Little Tyke. And a veterinarian examined her and said, it's the healthiest lion that I've ever seen. And this lion did not eat meat. Why do we think that lions are supposed to eat meat? It's because of your evolutionary bias. Automatically we assume that lions evolved to rip apart other animals and eat meat. These people that raised her, although not apparently Christians according to the article, found solace in the book of Genesis. To every beast of the earth, Genesis 1:30, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And the owners of Little Tyke found solace in that. Well, there's a picture of the lion right there. And I'll let you look at it afterwards. That's her, full grown. And there are some marvelous pictures here. The lion sitting in a convertible car, being driven along like you would a pet dog. Could not stand the thought of eating anything with blood in it. A mouse could run across this lion's nose and she wouldn't touch it. She was a vegetarian 100%. So Isaiah is absolutely right. It's not at all difficult for a carnivore to become an herbivore. The reason that we struggle with that is because of a bias that we have towards evolution. As a people, we have this automatic built-in bias that animals like lions must have to have meat to live, and it turns out they don't. She was an extremely healthy lion eating soybean milk, cheese, and scrambled eggs. She loves scrambled eggs. So there you have it. A lion that did not eat meat. Not only did she not have to, that she thrived and became extremely healthy without a diet of meat. We know that God created everything originally to not eat each other. We should have that bias. Thank you. You know, a long time ago in this country, a long time ago, back when I was still in college, and some of you would say that's when the Earth's crust was cooling, Lyndon Johnson had a dream for America. He called it, anybody remember, the War on Poverty. War on Poverty, Great Society. The War on Poverty, the Great Society. He meant well. So we started spending money. And the mindset is still there, isn't it? It has to be because of the money if one succeeds. So we built projects. They crumbled. We spent money on the school system. That's crumbling. In fact, if you read that little enclosure that I gave you this morning, that on coming up on the anniversary of Littleton High School, it's a pretty powerful thing. Don't read it now. Well, because of the frenzy created as a result of the Kansas School Board, these poor people, all they did was say that you don't have to teach evolution as the underlying principle of science. Those of you that heard my W. Bach announcement, I kept saying that. I said it once, they played it over and over and over again. All the Kansas school board did was say, no, you don't have to teach evolution as the underlying principle of science. And of course it isn't an underlying principle. It's not even science. It's philosophy, because you can't prove it. That's why you can debate it. That's all they did. They didn't say you're not going to teach evolution. Every youngster that graduates from a school in Kansas will know as much about evolution as a youngster that graduates from a school in Biddeford, Saco, Portland, or any place else. They just don't have to teach it as the unifying, underlying principle of science. Well, it created quite a furor. In fact, it did create, as they say here, a frenzied reaction. Well, some of the media was saying it's because creationists spend so much money. That's the reason that creationists are winning debates. Dr. Ken Hovind has never lost a debate. Dr. Duane Gish from the Institute for Creation Research has never lost a debate. Dr. Gary Parker from Answers in Genesis has never lost a debate. In fact, it is difficult now to find anybody to debate any of those three people. And when I say lost a debate, debates are judged. Those of you that took debating in school, there's a classic way to judge a debate, and whether they like it or not, there's always a winner or a loser. No creationist has ever lost a debate. Of those three, anyway. Well, so the media says it's because they spend so much money. So a University of California professor who is not a creationist, he's an evolutionist, said, I want to test this. You see, there are honest scientists. There are a great many honest scientists that are evolutionists. And this guy says, I want to test this. So what he found out was, and he wrote to a number of different people. This was reported, it's in the latest Answers in Creation magazine. He went to NASA, Department of the Energy, and places like that. And he just did a survey. As a professor, had one of his graduate students do a survey on how much money is spent by evolutionists. As it turns out, last year was $10 billion, in excess of $10 billion of all taxpayer money. $10 billion of taxpayer money. Think about that. This Tuesday, as you mail in your... Is it Monday or Tuesday? Tuesday, as you mail in your form. Over $10 billion of taxpayer money was used to fund evolutionary research. You know how much taxpayer money is used to fund creation research? Not 1 cent. All creation research in this country is done basically by the Institute for Creation Research. She agrees with me. Oh, Dad's up there. The Institute for Creation Research, their budget is less than 1/100th of that. It's way less. It's in the couple $100,000. So is it the money spent? No, it's not the money spent. You would think by now that America would know the solution to problems is not throwing money at it. The solution to any problem is much deeper than that, no matter what the problem is. Is it the money spent? If it were the money spent, every creationist should have lost the debate. Dr. Kent Hovind would have given away his $10,000 by now. He has by the way, Dr. Kent Hovind has a challenge. You prove to me in an officially judged debate that I'm wrong about creation, and I will give you $10,000. That's a statement he made years ago, and he still has not spent his money. He still has his $10,000. Is it the money spent? Not at all. It's something far deeper than that. It's because the creationists are simply standing on the Word of God, number one. And number two, they're using logical science. They're using just plain logical science. I made a statement recently at a secular school. I went to talk to an 8th grade class about physics. And I defined science, the way that the textbooks define science. Observation, repeatability, and description. And I said, by the way, if you get into a debate, we're talking about the heavy objects and the light objects. If you get into a debate in science, it can be solved by observation and description. If it cannot be solved by observation and description, it's not science, it's philosophy. There's no such thing as debate in science, because science is real life. Science is seeing. Science is doing. Science is describing. So the minute you get into an area where it's debatable, you are no longer in the area of science. You are in the area of philosophy, and honest evolutionists admit that, and I have quotes from evolutionists that say that. So is it the money spent? No, it's not. It's because the creationists are standing on God's Word and on real science. Thank you. He defeated death, but Jesus also is our creator. He designed the world that we're in. This world is not the result of an accident. Interesting little article, a very short article, in Creation magazine this last couple months. And it's on something called the DNA computer. Interesting that as hard as man tries to design a computer system, a computing system, and my sister Chi here works in electrical engineering. She's a designer of circuitry. It turns out that nobody has ever designed anything as efficient as a DNA molecule. So what researchers have done is they finally figured out a way to use, in part anyway, a few strands of a DNA molecule, and it turns out 1 gram of DNA can hold the information equivalent of 1 trillion CDs. That's a little itsy-bitsy teeny bit of DNA compared to 1 trillion CDs. Also, they've discovered this, as they call it, this fledgling computer solve problems in far fewer steps than a conventional computer. So the researchers expect that biocomputers, which is the future, DNA computers using a DNA molecule, to be capable of dealing with problems of greater complexity and using less space. That's an article from Nature magazine, Nature, January 13th, year 2000. A DNA computer, and associated with that, in the very upper corner of the same page, it turns out IBM is planning to spend $100 million to build something that's called Blue Gene. Blue Gene is a computer, it's called a supercomputer. What they want to do is do one process. They want to fold a protein molecule. Proteins are chains, and they have to be folded in nature into a three-dimension configuration to be usable. Well, it's going to take them 5 years to build Blue Gene using today's technology at a cost of about $100 million. I guarantee you it'll go up before they're done. And after they build this computer in 5 years, it's going to take Blue Gene over a year to run the simulation to fold 1 protein molecule. How long does your cell take to do it? How long does it take to fold a protein molecule using your DNA? Less than a second. And this is, I have a little, sometimes I put notes in the margins of things that I read, and one of them, I have a note here, I have, well, duh. An IBM researcher says, you know, it's amazing the complexity of the problem and the simplicity with which the body does it every day. Well, duh. So there's 2 examples. At a cost of $100 million, IBM is going to build over a 5-year period a supercomputer called Blue Gene to fold a protein molecule, which will take 1 year to do once it has been built. Takes your body less than a second. On the other side of the coin, scientists have discovered if they use some synthetic DNA, or a little strand of DNA in the computer itself, it operates far quicker, far more efficiently, using less space than anything they can build. So they really believe for microcomputers the future is biocomputing. So what they're saying then is that the best efforts of design of man cannot match accident? An accident? Well, that's what evolution says that you are. Evolutionists will tell you from high school biology through college biology that you are the result of an accident. That once upon a time there was nothing, it exploded, created particles of matter, which coalesced into rocks, which became frogs, which became princesses, all by itself. So what they're saying is that with all of the intelligent design that we put into things, we can't match an accident? No. Ludicrous. As Dr. Kent Hovind would say, and I do quote him from time to time, are you dumb in any other area if you really honestly believe that you are the result of an accident? Especially when you see things like this, when the greatest minds of man are working together and discovered that the best thing they can do, since they can't duplicate DNA, is use it in a computer. Doesn't that just blow you away? And you know who built DNA? He resurrected 2,000 years ago. The Bible's crystal clear. The world was created by Jesus. Jesus is the creator. He's the author of life. He's the one that put the DNA molecule together. He's the one that put you together. So this Resurrection Sunday, we celebrate not just the resurrection of Jesus, but we celebrate the glory of Jesus, or at least I do in my heart. What an absolutely awesome God we serve. The Creator God, who shows us over and over and over again in our science, if we will but listen, that there is nothing comparable to Him and what He has done. Don't kid yourself with the silliness of man. Focus on God. So the greatest computer in the world is inside you. It's DNA. We can't match it. We never will. So they're going to just try to use it. Interesting. Thank you.